Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karkur Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, as well as personal response to each of the chapters. We'll also be discussing how the chapter itself connects to the rest of the series as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are currently discussing for the episode. This is Chapter 108 and the beginning of Volume 13. So, let's begin. This is Bleach, Volume 13, a Shonen Jump manga with story and art by Ch.108. I moved at the end of April. My landlords threw a farewell party for me. They've been really helpful. Thank you so much. Because I wrote about it here, my landlord's wife kindly left the onions out of the salad. But there were turnips in their place. I'm sorry. I can't eat turnips either. They had things like this ostrich egg in their house. They called it the world's biggest single-cell organism. Come to think of it, I guess it's true? Bleach is author Ch.108's second title. Kuba made his debut with Zombie Powder, a 4-volume series for Weekly Shonen Jump. To date, Bleach has been translated into numerous languages and has inspired an animated TV series that began airing in Japan in 2004. Beginning its serialization in 2001, Bleach is still a mainstay in the pages of Weekly Shonen Jump. In 2005, Bleach was awarded the prestigious Shogakukan Manga Award in the Shonen Boys category. By the way, this has a parental advisory. Bleach is rated T for teen and is recommended for ages 13 and up. This volume contains fantasy violence. Every time we set aside our pride, we take a step closer to the beast. Every time we kill an emotion, we take a step away from the beast. Bleach, Volume 13, The Undead. These are the Bleach All Stars and Stories. We have Yachiru Kusajishi, Zangetsu, Ganju Shiba, Ichigo Kurosaki, Rukia Kuchiki, and Kenpachi Zaraki. Here's the plot. After a fateful encounter with the Soul Reaper Rukia Kuchiki, Ichigo Kurosaki himself becomes the Soul Reaper. Now, Ichigo and his friends have infiltrated the stronghold of the Soul Reapers to save Rukia. But the formidable Kenpachi Zaraki blocks Ichigo just steps away from Rukia's cell. And while Ichigo is struggling against Kenpachi's tremendous spiritual pressure, Chad faces a fearsome enemy of his own in Shunsui Kyoraku. Meanwhile, the Soul Reapers are shocked to learn that Captain Aizen has been murdered. This is again Bleach Volume 13, The Undead. And this is Chapter 108, A Time to Scare. What is it? Couldn't they have used a hell butterfly to send a message? Yes. Agents of the Rite Tai, the Secret Remote Squad, 5th Squad, Messenger Division. But this one has been signed by both Captain General Yamamoto and Captain Hitsugaya of the 10th Company. A joint signature. Is it top secret? For a human to set foot in the Seirei is impressive in itself. But for one to fight so well, you're quite a specimen. On top of that, the power of his last blow was truly amazing. I'm glad he missed me. Captain Kyoraku, a message! You're out of breath. What's wrong? Come to think of it, a boy with Rite Tai was just here. So? Captain Aizen is dead! His Sekatsu chain and Hakushi soul sleep were removed, and his heart was destroyed by his Zanpakuto. It was murder. and the killer's identity is unknown. It's a top-secret message signed by General Yamamoto and Captain Hitsugaya. I believe the information is accurate. I see. Sosuke, eh? Well, shall we pay our respects? Yes. Is something wrong, Captain Kyoraku? This Ryoka is still alive. A Ryoka is a soul that enters the Soul Society illegally. Shall I finish him? No. That's no job for a young lady. But his cohorts must have killed Captain Aizen. Yes, probably, but perhaps not. What? Well, we don't know for sure. In any case, there's no need to summarily kill him. Have the relief company secure him. If he is responsible, that's all the more reason not to kill him. Got it? Yes, sir. I'll take care of it right away. Forgive my impertinence. Things seem to be getting complicated. Bleach, Chapter 108, A Time to Scare. This is Nanao Issei. Ah! Is running away all you can do? Calm down. I can cut him. There's no reason I can't. Darn it! Stop being such a wimp! Stop running away. I don't enjoy chasing rabbits. Darn it. Why? I'm hitting him, but I still can't cut him. Is he that much more powerful than me? Darn it! No. Calm down. Relax. There's no reason I can't cut him. I'm afraid of his spiritual pressure right now. That's what's wrong. If I calm down and intensify my own spiritual pressure, I should be able to cut him. It's like what Zengetsu said. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Abandon your fears. Look ahead. If you retreat, you'll die. I can win. I can win. If I'm afraid, I'm dead. I can win. 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 All right, let's do this. Did Chad's spiritual pressure vanish? No. It can't be. Did Chad lose? Is he dead? No way. I don't believe it. He couldn't have lost. He's alive. His spiritual pressure is weak, but it's still there. Get a grip. What am I afraid of? If I lose, Chad Norihime, Uryu and Ganju, Mr. Yurichi, everybody who helped me will die. I can't afford to be scared. There you are. Are you prepared to die, or have you given up? Neither one. Hold on, Chad. I'll take this guy out and come for you. I promise. Sorry. I'm not ready to die just yet. Because if I die, I'll lose everything I've been fighting for. Oh, what have I done with my Zanpakuto? Did you even have one? I know, a secret path to that tower. You didn't have one when you said that. That is it for the beginning of Volume 13, The Undead, as well as Chapter 108, the title, which I do not remember off of the top of my head. I'm sure it has a title that, yeah, A Time to Scare. Oh boy, I'm very bad at remembering these chapter titles. You may find that I am terrible with names and titles alike. I'm really bad at tying names to things. Um, I'm much more attuned to kind of conceptual work rather than factual underpinning. So, yeah, was never great at learning new languages. Was never great at things like biology. Where I just had to learn a bunch of facts that are connected to words that I didn't have a lot of first-hand use. Let's get to the beginning of this volume, why don't we? Let's talk about Volume 13's beginning, The Undead. And as you can see, we do have Zaraki Kenpachi on the cover. And with the volume being called The Undead, it's very clearly a volume that's meant to evoke that The Undead chapter, which isn't even in this volume. It's kind of hilarious that The Undead chapter falls outside of the volume. As usually whenever the volumes are named after a chapter, we tend to get that chapter contained within the volume, but that's not the case here. But there is perhaps two reasons for that. One of which I can talk about now. The other of which is perhaps a spoiler, so I will talk about it in the spoiler territory. Nevertheless, the first being that this is really the beginning of the fight with Kenpachi. The previous battles that we've had with Zaraki, the previous kind of clash that we had, Ichigo was unable to lay an actual hit on him, and so it was really a prelude. It was really Ichigo not ready to engage with that fight. Ichigo really kind of in terror and not really resolved to actually battle Zaraki. And so it's neat, of course, that now we do have Ichigo here to begin the fight, and so therefore this volume begins with that, and this volume will be, of course, focused on their battle. The other big reason, so the undead. Obviously, we're talking about Zaraki, the undead, how he's often kind of linked to all these images of death, all these images of the undead. We talked about in previous chapters how skeletal kind of imagery is often coupled with Zaraki. We discussed the Gashadokuro. I'm going to pronounce that wrong every time. I think it's Gashadokuro. Anyway, giant, horrible undead skeleton. Zaraki being this survivor of many battles, being literally a spiritual, like a Grim Reaper himself. So he is essentially this figure of undeath. But something that I think is worth keeping in mind, and something that is really kind of significant here, is that the undead also links back to Ichigo himself, because Ichigo has been killed and still clings to life. You may easily forget that Ichigo actually literally has been killed by technically Tessai, though, Urahara killed him, severed his soul chain. That is what killing someone is, in order for Ichigo to obtain his Soul Reaper powers. And truly, this battle is a culmination of those Soul Reaper powers that Ichigo gained whenever he was killed. And if he wouldn't have gained those Soul Reaper powers, he would have become a Hollow, right? That was ultimately the conflict that was happening there. And so this volume focuses not on just Zaraki, who's put front and center, which is meant to be the immediate kind of thing we pick up on. And it's like, oh, the undead, haha, it's Zaraki. But undead's plural is undead. And so it's actually winkingly also about Ichigo, and Ichigo as this undead figure, and rising into this kind of circle of battle that characters like Kenpachi Zaraki are in. They are both the undead, and they are both clashing with each other. They are both a part of this world of the undead. And so it's really cool to think about that, and especially those that have risen from the dead, right? Whenever we think about undead, we're not just talking about the dead, right? We're talking about the undead, those who have died yet still move with some sort of purpose, and typically that purpose is sinister. Typically that purpose draws them to battle. Usually we don't think of the undead as particularly generous. We think of them as trying to feast upon the living, or battle in some sort of way. And so certainly having what is essentially two ghosts doing battle here, it fits. I also do really like this chapter cover. This is one of the few volumes that I made sure that I've always owned. The other volumes of Bleach have come into my possession and gone out of it. I often lend out a lot of volumes. Sometimes I've given away several. But I've always tried to keep a hand on the first volume and a couple of others. And this one, number 13, The Undead, is always one that I held on to. I'm really particularly fond of a lot of the chapters in this, but especially I love this cover of Zaraki. I think it's really kind of dynamic, especially compared to the previous chapter covers that we've got. I love that he takes up, over the whole cover, and so you can't even see the top of him. He's just very imposing. I really love the shading on both his robes as well as his face and chest. That lighting is fantastic. It's a fantastic, really exciting, visceral depiction of the character. I love the kind of cut open and tattered cloth of his what is it? His Hiyori, or his oh boy, basically his robes, right? His whole uniform's all shredded, and I love the swatches of kind of color that come across the bottom. It really gives this a sort of mid-battle flare, and the sort of blue tinge to everything. I dig it. It's definitely a favorite volume cover of mine. It's very evocative of what you're going to be getting here, and so I'm about it. Also, of course, 13 being, that's a number that we hold significance of in the West, right, as a spooky number. There are reasons for it. I think it's supposed to be, originally, I think it's supposed to be the number of steps to your own execution, right? That it's 13 steps to the guillotine, something like that. I think that's the initial significance of it. Nevertheless, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I do love that Kubo includes that his landlord left out the onions because he said in one of these that he didn't like onions, but she put in turnips and he can't have those either. I think that's a cute little bit. Instead of just asking Kubo what he would like to eat for his farewell party, some of the food that are in there. The salad, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know that an egg is a single cell organism. Could be wrong. Something for someone else to correct me on. Coming to the chapter, so we have a close up of a hand. Now we could assume that this might be Zaraki, since he's on the volume cover, as well as we do have this very bloodied hand. So maybe, but this also could be a poem from Ichigo. It's unclear as of this moment, and perhaps will become clearer throughout the rest of the volume. But we have this idea of there being this beast, right? That every time that we set aside our pride, we're closer to the beast, and then every time that we kill an emotion, we're further from the beast. So this beast being this kind of emotional thing that is prideless, whereas pride is this sort of thing that helps us keep ourselves away from sort of this rampaging, this beast, right? That there's this bestial side of us, and certainly there's this idea of beasthood or uncivilized, some sort of whenever you think of a beast, it is this thing that is distinctly apart from society. It's this thing that can't be civilized. It's this thing that can't exist within society, and certainly the hollows fill in that realm. So this might be evocative within the story already of hollows, but within this battle with Zaraki, it's immediately evocative of the idea of being this kind of bloodthirsty person, like Zaraki is, this person who enjoys fighting, that lives for fighting, this bestial kind of existence, right? And so the idea is that you know, a beast doesn't have any pride. It will attack without it doesn't know that sort of construct, um, right? And that also, curiously enough, like the idea of killing our emotions, right? The idea of like deafening our personal desires is also a thing that like lets us stray from the beast. So beast is this very emotional thing that doesn't isn't is bound more for emotion than it is by these constructs of society, things like pride, things like ugh, relative to this sense of, I guess, self-worth, right? Um, and so it's interesting. It kind of reflects on maybe the downsides or different aspects of being a highly individualistic person, which Bleach is really focused on, right? The connections that we have to others as well as ourself, the importance of the self and one's own desires versus the importance of just the upholding societal values and your own place in society. How are you going to protect others, right? And so evoking pride, evoking emotion. I think those are two things that are constantly kind of at war. It's easy to really think about Byakuya Kichiki, right? Byakuya? God, I'm gonna. Anyway, names. Katakuchiki. It's easy to think about him as he's a very proud character that kills his emotions, right? So he is arguably within this framework the furthest from the beast. Whereas Ichigo, I think, has a certain amount of pride to him. But that said, Ichigo is a very emotional kind of character, right? Meanwhile, I don't think Kenpachi is one that often professes very much pride. Like he will fight, and that's all he cares about, right? But we haven't really seen all that much emotion from Kenpachi. Perhaps we've really only seen him, excited or disappointed. We haven't really garnered like all this I guess other elements to him. But he doesn't come off as a cold character, like one that's killed his own emotions. So yeah, it's interesting. This idea of this beast that you can become. Um, and like what it means to be closer or further from it. Anyway, let's not sit on that too often. Of course, we do get our important characters here, and of course, Kenpachi, Rukia, Ichigo, along with Ganju, Yachiru, and Zangetsu. And so it's interesting that Zangetsu gets mentioned here, as it does kind of let us know that, hey, Ichigo and his relationship to his sword will be important, and we do get that evoked in this chapter, which I do appreciate. But getting into the chapter proper, I like that Nanao is just hanging out on top of this wall watching this happen. She has all these ledgers and things with her. It's kind of interesting. And she gets this guy from the Riteitai, a part of the 5th Squad. It's a secret remote unit. And so if you remember the 5th Squad, I believe is Aizen's squad, right? So they have like a remote unit for sending messages of high importance, it seems. Or at least they have a division for that, right? So this is a guy from the messenger division, and it's interesting that she mentions, like, couldn't they have just sent a hell butterfly to communicate this message? So we get a little bit of the significance of hell butterflies, because before we've only seen them really whenever a character appears in the human world, a hell butterfly appears as well with them. We had that whenever Rukia first arrived in the realm of humans, as well as the other characters, as well as I believe Renji and Byakuya. But yeah, cute that it's like, well, you could have just sent a hell butterfly, but because this is such a significant message, I mean, one of Aizen's death that has been signed by Yamamoto as well as Hitsugaya, the idea is that this is a message that it needs to be authentic, it needs to be delivered. It is perhaps a top secret message. And of course, we get the aftermath of this battle. We see Chad laid out. Shunsui does not seem all that bothered. I like this kind of zoom in. We do get, as much as it is kind of reconciliation or maybe something to kind of assure us that, hey, maybe Chad isn't the worst, it's like, yeah, he did have a truly powerful kind of final attack that he tried to submit. It's just that Shunsui is on such another level, you know? Yeah, I'm glad he missed. I like that he's got a little bit of sweat, not too much. Of course, this message has been really striking for Nanao, and it's interesting that he conveyed it to Nanao and not just straight to Shunsui, but the all black used to convey the shock of this information, I think, is effective. And I really do like that we get this rather shocked Shunsui as he looks across, and there's a moment of his lighthearted character sort of breaking here. But in this bit where it gets described to us exactly what happened, it's interesting. You know, we had this evoked just recently with Uryu, but the idea of the Saketsu and the Hakusui, the soul's chain and soul sleep, right? So your chain that is essentially, if severed, you die, as well as the soul sleep, which is where you're able to produce your Reiatsu from. Both of those were removed, and his heart was destroyed. So, like, whoever killed Aizen was really thorough. um, and we are told a couple things. This does give us a few kind of insights, right? Um, because the only characters that we know have really intimate knowledge of the Seketsu and the Hakusui that we've been shown have been, uh, you know, obviously Kisuke Urahara, as well as Uryu, right? Ishida Uryu. He was able to do that, and that's why it's perhaps why he did that to defeat Jirobo earlier, is because it would put this back in our mind, the idea of there being these really significant kind of aspects of the soul. But notably, Byakuya, that's how he stopped Ichigo, is he actually severed Ichigo's soul sleep. He didn't cut Ichigo's Seketsu chain, notably. He just destroyed his soul sleep. The idea was that he was trying to render Ichigo unable to ever manifest his powers, but still leave him maybe alive. Like, he didn't kill him, which is notable. So yeah, you could jump to the conclusion, well, Byakuya maybe did this, right? Because we know him to be someone with that amount of precise kind of attacking, and we know he's very quick, and we know that perhaps he could have done that to Captain Aizen, like in the middle of the night, you know, maybe. Though, and certainly if you think about, like, well, Byakuya has been very cold and very hands-on regarding Rukia's execution. Um, Perhaps he is involved in this a little bit more than we know. That said, I'm not going to say that they're the only people that know about the Seketsu and Hakusui or how to inflict damage upon them, because certainly the fact that she is saying this to Kyoraku means that they both understand the significance of those elements of the soul. And certainly, I think all Soul Reapers might, or at least all that have gone through Academy, it seems to be something that's a little bit more common knowledge than not. So, yeah, as far as actually how to damage it and seeing people that have damaged it in the series, we've only seen that come from two of our characters, because it's an incredibly precise attack. So, this essentially does let us know, hey, whoever killed Aizen was very knowledgeable and very quick about doing this murder. Which we could have probably already come to the conclusion of. I mean, it's a captain. I do think that we maybe should have gotten a little bit more from Aizen before he died, because with him dying so early, maybe, you know, the power of captains hasn't been established quite hard enough for us to really understand the scope and the severity of this. Though this reminder coming with Shunsui, I think, does help to establish that like, we've just seen how overwhelmingly powerful a captain is, and then to have this walkthrough here with Nanao explaining it to us really helps us get a little bit of perspective of how significant an event this was. But yeah, Shinsui, he quickly kind of gathers himself again, and you know, he's like, well, let's pay our respects. You know, like, I like also the distance that we're drawn here. That he's, you know, before, whenever we see him truly affected, he's very pulled into close up, and we can see the shock in his expression here. as well as here, and then he kind of puts on a cool face yet again in front of his vice captain, in front of Nanao, um, and kind of tips his hat, and we get this relative distance that he is putting between himself and the actuality of the event. And perhaps we can tell from his expression, and probably his demeanor too. You could think that Shunsui might not have very much to do with Aizen's murder and the conspiracy, but who knows? Now I like that she does look over, and we get this kind of glance aside over to Chad, which she's like, "Hey, Chad's still alive," um, and I like that Shunsui stops that. He's like, "Hey, look, uh, that's not a job for a young lady," which is pretty sexist. I mean, we're in a militant organization. Women are probably groomed to kill all the time here. Let's be real, but like, I like that her insistence that his cohorts must have killed Captain Eisen, even though she just spelled out that it was a Zenpakuto. I mean, we know that Ichigo's involved with the Ryoka, so perhaps in their misunderstanding of what the Ryoka deal is, they must assume that one of them might be a Soul Reaper, right? They've got that news, right? That one has a big Zenpakuto. That's like the rumor floating around. And certainly anyone that's kind of in the know might suspect that this perhaps even is Kisuke Urahara, right? Because who else would have a way for people to infiltrate the Soul Society? Nevertheless, I like that Shunsui does have this take where he's like, well, yeah, probably they did it, but maybe not. That he's really kind of considering the different angles on this. Like, who could have killed Aizen? He's not going to just chalk it up to the Ryoka. Whereas we get Nanao really quickly coming to that conclusion. And our takeaway that we could have from that could be, well, is Nanao quick to come to these conclusions? Is she not going to suspect her fellows? Or is she already kind of under this wider conspiracy where she's complicit in it for one reason or another? Who knows? That said, Shunsui just kind of wielding his power here and being hesitant perhaps speaks to his character, keeping options open, trying to look into things, and certainly we get a little bit of that where he's like, look, we don't need to kill him, just have him secured, and besides, if they are responsible, then we're going to want to question them anyway. And I do like the kind of mirroring of their faces here that we get in Nao's face, and then Chunsui's right underneath as he looks to the sky, and he's like, well, it looks like things are getting complicated, right? Which was a little bit of, I think the dialogue earlier in the previous volume, that he had this kind of frustration over things getting a little bit more complicated. Here we do get to see Nanao in her full design. Of course, she has this large book with her. We do not see a Zanpakuto on her, which is notable. And she hasn't drawn her weapon yet. Whenever she went to kill Chad, she's just going to do it with her hand, right? So she's just got the spiritual energy around her hand. And so it's unclear. But, she's got glasses, she's very well put together. She wears her badge on her arm. She's got a very straightforward kind of design without very many differences from the typical Soul Reaper design. She carries this book. And really, I think the takeaway from her design that we can take is that Now is very much about doing things by the book. She doesn't change up her appearance very much from the typical expected Soul Reaper appearance. She is very much studious and kind of articulate and straightforward. But we've already kind of seen the pitfalls of that, as well as perhaps its strengths. That she is analytical and serious, but perhaps it's hard to really read out, that much else from her, I suppose. I don't know. I think every vice captain does have things that set them aside, and certainly I think one of the big things that sets Nanao apart from the others is, one, there's not any clear Zanpakuto on her, which is curious. Two, she seems obviously she's very juxtaposed to her commander, and so she is much more serious about her position as a Soul Reaper and takes that kind of position quite seriously. Whereas it doesn't seem, like while Shunsui doesn't take it as seriously, he's still willing to kind of begrudgingly do the work of Soul Society. And so both of them essentially work as agents of Soul Society, whereas Shunsui perhaps is a little more questioning or a little more willing to give into his personal desires. He sees like the leeway within the system, and now seems a lot more kind of dedicated to it, and she has a little bit more of that rigidity within her. It's an interesting pairing for sure, and I think really she helps to highlight Shunsui's and comedically too, as we saw, Shunsui's kind of disregard for some of the rules, as well as his kind of easygoing nature versus how sort of stern and orderly Nanao is, and ultimately kind of like Nanao ends up being a sort of like standard benchmark for a lot of the other vice captains that we get. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think that people probably overlook her because she is pretty like normal. She doesn't have anything that's like really distinguishing her as separate or aside from what is expected of a Shinigami. Outside of, again, not seemingly carrying a Zenpakuto, and we haven't seen her in battle yet, so it's really hard to tell one way or another. Nevertheless, I do think Nanao is an interesting character, and I think she works really well whenever paired with Shunsui, because it really allows them both to interact in a pretty dynamic way that does better to define both of them, and really bring out the extremities that both of them represent. Whereas Nanao is, again, a much more traditional upholder of what it means to be a Shinigami, and certainly, even though he upholds the duties of the Seirei, and the Shinigami, Shunsui seems less so. We get back to this battle, and I love that the kind of sound effects slur down the page here, this big snaking of fight as we get Ichigo and Kenpachi kind of all running around this labyrinthine kind of corridor, clashing with each other. Here, this page is much grayer than the darks used here, and I wonder if it was like, I don't know if it was published perhaps differently or what. If like this is like a singular color page, I doubt it. Usually, whenever you have something that's a little bit more grayscale than dark, it's because of that reason. I don't know if this is just a bad scan. Who knows? Could use higher contrast. Nevertheless, we get Ichigo kind of blocking this attack from Zaraki. I almost said from Zangetsu, using Zangetsu to block this attack and being pushed back, thrown back even, and then him turning and running, and Zaraki really calling him out for it. And I like that back and forth. That like we get these kind of claustrophobic panels and this intense kind of chase from Zaraki. And Ichigo's trying to really gather his resolve here, right? Because that was the big thing before, right? He needs to calm down. He needs to gather his resolve. I love this moment where we cut the next page. He looks over. Kenpachi bursts out of this wall to insist, hey, stop all that. I don't enjoy chasing rabbits. I like that we do get just like the one shot of Ichiro from way above, watching Ichigo down here. And he does the classic sort of like stabs and gets into the ground, leaning on it. Again, leaning really heavily on Zangetsu. And I like here that he kind of calls out the Zangetsu. He's like, look, that's what Zangetsu said, Abandoning your fears, look ahead, retreat, you'll die. If you're afraid, you're dead, right? So it's like you gotta face your enemy with Zangetsu, both of you side by side. So I like that Ichigo takes like a moment to really focus here. And I like that he's like, look, there's no reason I can't cut him. It's just because I'm not focused. It's because I haven't really, applied my resolve, right? It's because I'm afraid. And so it's interesting that like within this, we get that kind of turnaround. I like that he comes back and then he's like, he gains his resolve and then almost immediately like fears that Chad has died, right? That Chad's spiritual pressure has vanished. And I love these shots these I say shots, these panels of Ichigo, especially at the bottom of the page. I mean, the top ones are very good too, but like this one on the right, and then this other one here, where he's kind of limply holding his sword and he's cast in shadow as he's can't believe that Chad would have lost, right? Um, and I mean, like, really, from Ichigo's point of view, yeah, like it. Ichigo has gone into this perhaps a bit optimistic, yes, uh, but also there's definitely this sense that Chad's this guy that he's been fighting alongside for years, and Chad's always been the guy that so long as he fought, Chad was not able to be defeated by even significant odds, right? So Ichigo's kind of like, whoa, I don't want to believe that Chad's dead. He's kind of in denial about that, like Chad having lost, but having seen how powerful the captains are for himself, maybe Ichigo again, like I said, is perhaps naive to the fact of exactly what's happening. But I love this little kind of drop of like this little tiny, spark perhaps. I think that's very effective. And then Ichigo throwing his head up, noticing his spiritual pressure, and for Ichigo, this is a kind of cool moment because whenever we started this series, Ichigo wasn't very attuned to spiritual pressure. He couldn't really tell. He couldn't really pay that much attention. And we get the dynamicy that between him and other characters. Like Uryu's like, yeah, I noticed whenever you became a Shinigami, dude. Like I could tell. Like you were just being naive to it. But I love that Ichigo's like, what am I afraid of? If I lose, everyone else's life is on the line, right? Like, which is a start, like a conclusion certainly to come to as a protagonist. Once again, I do like Kubo using like a series of panels like this to depict like a larger picture. So here in the right panel, we get Ichigo like looking skyward, and then in the bottom left panel, we do get like where he's gripping Zangetsu as its own panel, but it also fits with the right panel to create that larger image of both of them combined. I always enjoy whenever that gets done. Not just like visually, but I think it also works really well for what's being conveyed here, where the right panel is meant to show, okay, Ichigo like hopefully kind of looking up, coming to this conclusion, and then the other panel is meant to really focus on that grip on Zangetsu that's happening within time, like at the same time, basically. And so it's able to kind of draw attention one way or another, but also convey that this is all happening sort of at once. We did very determined Ichigo, which, is nice after how much fear we've been seeing on him. And I like that, Zaraki's just chilling. He's like, okay, well, he's been waiting. And perhaps it's because Yachiru has been looking on Ichigo that Yachiru's perhaps even communicated this, like, hey, he's gathering himself, maybe she even spots for him. Who knows? And I'm like, you ready to die or have you given up? And he's like, neither. Which is a good back and forth, right? The Saraki at this point doesn't even see Ichigo as somebody who's actually capable of defeating him. And perhaps because of that, because Saraki underestimates Ichigo, that does help Ichigo and his capability of actually fighting Saraki. And I love this moment where, Ichigo dashes forward, he's very serious, and Saraki in this right panel looks like, oh, well, I could care less. And then there's that quick zoom in the eye as we get Ichigo making this desperate slash across his chest to a very shocked Zaraki, as he is sliced across the chest in typical Ichigo fashion, right? And of course, Ichigo being quite cool, I'm not ready to die yet, I'll lose everything that I've been fighting for. So we get this fight really starting, right? Ichigo, I love the kind of gust of energy, I suppose, the dust rolling all around him, the gathering sort of tempest of his power as he insists upon, like, I've done everything up to this point, I don't lose everything that I'm fighting for. Which, it's interesting because it's a lot of the same conclusion that Chad came to, right? Where he's like, I can't lose here, I'm fighting for Ichigo, and it's like, as we've learned, just because you're fighting for a lot, that's not enough to really make you able to win. Just because you have a powerful technique, certainly Chad did, It's not enough to overcome these other characters, and so that's sort of shonen optimism of like, oh well, this character has so much on the line, surely they'll win. We've already been shown that that's not enough within the world of Bleach, within the narrative of Bleach, really. And so Ichigo, yeah, like this is convenient for him because it does let him find his own resolve, which literally does make him stronger within the world of Bleach. It's not going to be enough to overcome Zaraki, perhaps to wound him, but not to overcome him on its own. But this is where the fight truly begins. And speaking of characters not carrying Zenpakuto, we do get a mention of Hanataro's Zenpakuto. He's like, oh no, what have I done with mine? Which is hilarious. We really get the sense that this is not a weapon that he uses often. And that, Ganju points out that he didn't have it on him even originally whenever they encountered each other. Which, whenever just walking around the Seirete, there's not a lot of reason to be carrying your Zenpakuto. Now, with the announcement of the Ryoka invasion, yes, absolutely, everybody should be armed. But, yeah, it seems as though, Hanataro doesn't have his with him, which is notable. It's something that I haven't really pointed out before, but it is significant and it is present. As Shinigami, as we know, have Zenpakuto. It's a very important kind of crucial element to any of the Shinigami that are a part of the Gotei 13, right? So you have to wonder also now that it's been drawn attention to here, like what exactly does Hanataro's Zenpakuto do? Is he even capable of releasing it? Is he even on that level? Who knows? Perhaps we will find out. Nevertheless, that is it for this chapter and the beginning of this volume. I will be hopping back to the beginning of it again to talk about spoilers, but in summation, I really do like the beginning of this fight. I do like that we get that relaying of news about Aizen's death to Shunsui and really see the different responses that Nanao and Shunsui have, especially regarding Chad. I really like, we really get the sense of Shunsui as being this person that is a lot more mature, and despite his like frivolities, he is somebody to take careful consideration of what's going on, especially upon learning of Aizen's murder. He's like, okay, well, we have to really, consider if this guy is one that did it, we should keep him for questioning. We shouldn't just kill him and jump to those conclusions. Things are getting complicated. We get the sense that he isn't like brash like Hitsugaya is. He's older in his years, certainly. So it's neat to see him kind of act in this more serious manner, especially juxtaposed to how lackadaisical he might have come off in the last volume. But also this fight between Zaraki and Ichigo is coming to a boiling point as they finally have drawn blood on each other, and now they can truly battle as the volume begins. I do like this chapter as a kind of lead in because now it really establishes like, okay, this Chad fight's over. The only conflict that we have on page happening right now is this Kenpachi fight with Zaraki. This Ichigo fight with Zaraki. So, we can really focus in on that. And so it brings us to the kind of conflict that we can expect to see moving forward, as well as reminding us again, as it should at the beginning of this volume, of the murder of Aizen and of that plot becoming a little bit more complex, that sort of conspiracy plot around Rugia's execution. So let's talk about spoilers, yeah? Like I can gush about what I like about the chapter forever, this volume forever, but let's get into spoilers. And the one thing that I did want to say with the undead connecting to Ichigo, of course, is that it is also evocative of Ichigo as having those, really honestly, Quincy as well as, hollow powers, right? That he gained those hollow powers in his undeath, but also made contact with those Quincy powers too. The Quincy being this kind of dead society that Ichigo, is able to capable of like evoke. So he has this sense of like resurrection or undeath, kind of fueling him in a lot of ways. and certainly the hollow stuff I think is leaned on a little bit more, right? The idea of Ichigo kind of having transcended death and gained more than just Shinigami powers, but also hollow powers is significant here. And again, I think ultimately the undead is like on surface value. Like surface is meant to be like, okay, well it's referring to Kenpachi, makes sense. And in a bigger way, you realize it's actually a reference to Ichigo, and then that comes with like the plural of undead, right? Referring to both Ichigo and Zaraki. Both of them kind of being the undead, especially Zaraki thinking of him like having kind of gained this new Soul Reaper life after everything that's happened in his past. That's interesting. Certainly, that was me going back to the previous volume. Um, I think the character poem is meant to be from Zaraki's POV. I certainly think that's supposed to be his hand covered in blood. Um, yeah, yeah. Anyway, do 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 do. Spoiler time. Interesting that they mentioned the hell butterflies again. We don't know exactly the full significance, other than their connection to hell, maybe as messengers between these different realms. Perhaps, who knows? We'll have to wait for more hell chapter stuff for that. Of course, there is this remote unit as a part of the fifth squad, which maybe shades up Aizen. I'm pretty sure Aizen's fifth. I'm pretty sure I'm not losing track of my squads. I'm really bad at that. Of course, we get Chad's blasts. Yeah, now as far as the Seketsu chain and Hakase being mentioned here, as well as his heart being destroyed, I think we come to find that is the Aizen's body is in fact. I'm pretty sure it's either an illusion or it's a. Moreover, I don't think it's an illusion so much as it is a specialized gi guy, right? I could be wrong. Could be completely losing my mind here because it's been a while since I've read those reveals. But yeah, it's interesting that we've gotten a little bit more there, and I think it ends up being like Retsu ends up being the one to suspect all of this after she realizes that it's not actually his physical kind of body. But again, as I mentioned before, his body would linger because of the immense sort of spiritual pressure there. Now, I did go back and reread a little bit, and one of the things that I was always wondering was, of course, the idea that how much Gin was operating individual of Aizen, and I think Aizen does say that part of his plan was reinforcing sending the third division and again specifically the wall to keep Ichigo out, and like knowing that then they would have to go to Kukaku and then break into the barrier and that they'd enter and split up and all of this, that Aizen had those separate elements calculated. He knew that the chaos from it would give him enough leeway to do X, Y, and Z. And I certainly think that like the specificity of his heart being destroyed and the soul sleep and Seketsu chain being removed are both like one meant to maybe be indicators of the fact that this isn't his actual spiritual body because it doesn't have those elements to it, but also maybe meant to make them think it would have been one of these captain level Shinigami that would have been capable of doing those things, right? Certainly they like now suspects the Ryoka, but from this interaction that they got already, like it's interesting here because now is like, well, one of these Ryoka might have done it, but like with how Shunsui absolutely bodied homeboy, Chad without even having to use his release, his Shikai. It really should, like, at this point, Shunsui, I think, understands. Maybe Nanao foolishly doesn't. But at this point, Shunsui absolutely knows the Ryoka didn't kill Aizen. Like, at this point, Shunsui understands that there is a conspiracy. And perhaps I could talk about this outside of the, spoiler stuff, certainly. But like, I think Shunsui is right to kind of be like, okay, well, this is complicated. So it's interesting here that Shunsui, knowing that it absolutely wasn't the Ryoka because of the difference in power, especially between Aizen and the person that he just fought. Um, Shunsui's actually kind of sparing Chad because he realizes that Chad's on not on the actual threat side of this conflict, right? And to a degree, if Shunsui was upholding the rules of the Serite, he probably would kill Chad for being an illegal invader of Ryoka and all of that. But that said, he wants to focus their efforts elsewhere because he realizes that another captain killing Aizen, or Aizen faking his own death, which he's probably starting to suspect right now, that's more significant, right? That somebody's taking advantage of the Ryoka invasion to do everything with Aizen and everything else. And I think that Shunsui has come to that conclusion in this moment, right? Like literally in the separation of like this panel to the next couple, that I think he's really realized like this isn't really what this isn't what happening. And a lot of people will cite this like the panel of him here where he says, yeah, probably, but perhaps not, as sort of assuaging the now while tipping his hat, but really kind of giving a nod towards the fact that he has figured out some level of the conspiracy, right? That it isn't the Ryoka at all that are to blame for this. Of course, back in our fights, we do get these clashes. I don't, I'm trying to think of a couple of different things here that we could actually call out and speak towards. Of course, we do get to see, Zaraki constantly just one-handing his weapon, which is notable. His two hands is a meme, but is a significant kind of development for him. I will mention, like, Ichiro watching from above is neat. It kind of speaks towards, of course, that's how, Zaraki's able to kind of find Ichigo, right? It speaks towards his perception of Ichigo, but it also, I like here that because Ichiro's actually able to spot him, and like see that he's trying to kind of recompose himself, Zaraki also kind of just pops a squad and is like, well, I'll just wait for him, right? It's interesting because like a lot of people will always cite this battle as an instance of like there being a couple of different things. Like a lot of people will use this as evidence that Zaraki himself isn't as strong as other characters as of the Soul Society arc, which I don't think is true at all. I think he is incredibly powerful here. It's just that he's giving Ichigo a lot more affordances, and perhaps that speaks towards a different kind of weakness. But yeah. But the other big thing is that like a lot of people will point to this battle as like, oh well, it's really inconsistent that Ichigo becomes so much stronger and can defeat a captain at this point, or that Zaraki is so much weaker whenever later on he's defeating like characters like Yami, no problem. And it's like, well, yeah, because the way that Zaraki's treating this battle is significantly different. Like he's had Ichigo hyped up in his mind, and so whenever he knows that Ichigo is trying to like kind of reconvene and gather his strength, like Zaraki goes and just chills out and lets Ichigo do that. Like Zaraki could have killed Ichigo several times at this point, but he hasn't because he's trying to tease out a bigger fight. And again, maybe that's a certain like character weakness of Zaraki's, but it doesn't show that he's weaker in other ways. Similarly, I think Ichigo has been given the time and been pushed to these limits, and whenever pushed into this corner, he's able to gather this resolve rather than just being cut down. And so, really, like, again, I don't think it's really fair to judge either of them based on the outcomes of this battle, or really say that it's highly inconsistent. I think doing so is negligent to the actual context of the fight itself. Of course, we talked already about like Ichigo losing about Chad. I like the idea that he's like, oh well, if I lose, then everybody will die, and it's like I don't know, Yorichi will be fine. I like that he doesn't mention Hanataro at all in this. Come on, Ichigo, he's your friend now. Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I don't really think that there's that much else to speak for. Um, I think that kind of covers it as far as the spoilers go. If you see something that I don't, please do let me know. But yeah, that's about it for this one again. Really, not much else to say here. So I do want to say thank you for watching this far. I know this is one of the longer ones, as often the introductory videos for each volume will be. But yeah, go ahead and give the video a like if you managed to get this far. Otherwise, again, please do share this with anybody that you think might be interested. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to support me in another way, you can always support me via Patreon. Currently, you can see all the supporters that I have as of now on the screen, and I want to give a huge shout out to the people that are there. Thank you so much. If you're curious, again, for supporting the Patreon, you can follow the link in the description. For this video or any of these videos are on the channel, and it is as cheap as $1 a month. Yeah, you have your name here. Make sure that you help the channel out, and maybe one day I'll be able to actually afford better recording equipment. Who knows? Maybe even have a better setup altogether down the line. We'll see. I've been putting aside funds for that. I hope to get a better both PC as well as recording setup, not just for recording the episodes, but also getting them rendered, because it is frustrating to have to take over an hour for each one of these episodes. And that's before, uploading them to YouTube, which usually takes another hour. Sometimes it has issues and it takes longer. So, nevertheless, thank you very much for your support, no matter what if that support is. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate you. And moreover, I appreciate Bleach allowing us to all come together and enjoy these things together and have this connection that we might not otherwise have. As always, this has been Card Gold, reminding you that spirits are always with you. No, wait, that's wrong. As always, this is Card Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.